Welcome back to the channel. In this episode of my projects, we're going to be taking a look at some thermal images inside the Project Civic. I'm going to talk just a little bit about what these images mean. I have pictures of the interior. I didn't get any images, any thermal images of the interior prior to the installation because I didn't think to start recording any of this until after I started the project. This is the fairly recent development, this whole thing. But I didn't think to start recording any of this until after I'd already had the installation in. And the installation is not stuff you can just remove and then put it back in. It's glued in place. You're not pulling it out. So here we have the firewall section. You can see I've still got the blower box installed. You can see that little mesh right here and this kind of big thing with the outline. That's the blower motor and the blend door for the recycler. That's still installed, but these three holes right here that have they appear to be colder than the rest of everything. That is the heater core pipe inlets, the evaporator pipe inlets, and then the water drain right there and below it. You can see everything is about even other than those holes in the firewall, obviously, because there's not going to be that much IR coming through the firewall just without the engine running or anything. So everything's pretty even here. Here's another baseline image. You can see the cold spot of the hole for the heater core tubes there. And again, you can see it's just kind of coolish there. Kind of warmish over here. It's kind of warm over here. So here is the transmission tunnel with, this cold spot has to do with the way infrared cameras work. This isn't actually that cold. It's not, that's not a really, really cold spot compared to all the rest of this. It's this really hot looking and then this really cold spot is just due to the reflective nature of the tape and the way that infrared cameras work. We can ignore it. For the most part, this is a baseline image, again, of the transmission tunnel. And if I move out of the way to the shifter right here, you can see the floor right here. That is that uncovered section, right? And over here, all of this is uncovered. There's no tape or insulation other than the factory asphalt, and I'm leaving that there as my baseline. But all this kind of hot stuff right here, this cold area right here, and the hot stuff here is again the same thing. Just the way an infrared camera works causes those kind of artifacts. When using an infrared camera, if you look at something and it's very reflective visually, if you point at aluminum foil or a mirror or something like that, you can get these weird artifacts. So we don't really worry too much about what it looks like in the camera, other than being a car and being the interior of a car. I know I can touch these things, so I use the infrared camera to give me some kind of base idea, and then I'll touch various bits, do a touch test. And so this is the baseline image of the roof in the sun, sitting outside in the driveway. It had to have been a hotter part of the day. That's 42°C, so it had to have been on one of those days where it was in the mid to high 90s Fahrenheit, so 35, 36°C outside. It was pretty warm, so that makes sense, and you can see it appears to get cooler over here, right, and warmer over there, and I don't quite know what that is, but it's only like a quarter of a degree difference between one edge to the other, really. So again, baseline image. Here is an image on a hot day of the back window, and you can see, I mean, 64°C is what it says. I don't know how accurate that is when looking at glass, but the glass is tinted, so it might be pretty accurate. I'm not sure. But this is the back window on a hot day, sun's beating on it. This is what you're going to get coming into the cabin as radiation, right? So this is the stuff This and the absorption of materials inside the cabin is what makes the inside of your car hot when you get into it, right? Is this exact effect. As you can see, the trunk down below and then the roof up top are substantially cooler surface temperatures than what the window appears to be. All right, now this is an image after driving around for a little bit, and you can see, interestingly enough, the ECU is pretty warm, right? And then you've got here and there. Those are the evaporator and heater core holes that come through the firewall to feed your HVAC system. And you can see there's a lot of heat coming through those. You can also see down here in the bottom of the image a bunch of heat right there in the middle. Yep, again, you can see right there, there's a bunch of heat around the shifter. You see there's kind of a hot spot right there. That's about, so the cat sits about right there-ish in underneath the body. And you can see the floor. Interestingly, if you look right at the edge of the tape, there's cool spots all along the edge of the tape. You can see there's a hot spot there, but as you get closer, where I put tape and thing and insulation, it's cooler. But this bit of metal right here around the shifter that's unprotected, you can see is very hot. And then the hot spot right here along that bracket is very hot. Okay, here's an interesting one. So this hole right here is where the factory dome light was installed in the Civic. You can see I've gotten rid of the central dome light. I'm going to put in 2 separate rails along the outer edges, so I don't need this hole anymore. But putting the factory headliner back up, the hole's still going to be there. You can see the insulation that I installed up there. You can see there's a hot spot down here in this corner, and that's closer to the side window on the passenger side and closer to the back. And you can see the difference in heat. There is a fairly substantial temperature difference. So here is an image after driving for some time on the highway, right? This is heavy load, 80 miles an hour, driving down the highway and dumping a bunch of heat into the exhaust. You can see the unprotected, the uncovered metal right around the shifter, which is where I've always had kind of an issue because the shifter itself gets really hot during these long highway trips. But you can see all that heat, and then you can see the heat bleed, right? Because the hump in the floor where the exhaust sits, all that metal is going to get hot. And then the further away from the exhaust you get, the cooler the metal's going to get because it can radiate back out to space. You can see that in here, right? All along here, you've got heat, and then it kind of fades away as it goes further out. And here's another of in front of the shifter, right? So right here is where the cup holders used to sit. The center console used to be about right here-ish. And you can see there is a bunch of heat right here along what would be where the firewall meets the floor pan. That kind of interface right there in that corner, that's what all this is. And you can see there's a bunch of heat there because the cat sits right here in this spot underneath the body. The cat is going to put out a lot of heat, a ton of heat, enormous amounts of heat. It's going to be, 150 to 300 degrees hotter than the rest of the exhaust system because it's catalyzing the nitrous oxides, right? So you're going to get biochemical reactions or heat. So here's another image of driving on the highway. And funnily enough, you see this hot spot, this kind of line coming down? That is my battery cable, because the battery's in the trunk. All right, so we see here, heat coming through the heater core and the evaporator holes in the firewall, but we also see some of this other stuff here around them. Just for comparison's sake, here's a baseline image after driving for a while. It almost looks like I'm just inverting the colors on the image, but that's not what's happening. I'm going from one image to the next, and you can see this seam up at the top. It moves. It's not inverting the colors. That is actual thermal energy that we are seeing as the difference between the baseline and driving around. So here's an image after driving in the rain for a bit. I pulled back into the driveway, and you can see kind of the splotches all over the window there, and you can see kind of little dots on the windshield, right? And it's just raindrops, and that's how the camera's drawing them. But you can see, you know, the glass is cooler than much of the interior. That's a toolbox and the jack in the back of the trunk there, and they're far warmer than the glass. Interesting thing to note, if you look along here, so this is the trunk lid, and all these little kind of holes, these thermal holes, those are the bare metal on the outside of the trunk lid. It's the skin of the trunk lid. The bits in between that are warmer, like the webbing, that is structural metal that they put in to keep the trunk lid rigid. And it's interesting to see that the thermal energy doesn't transfer that readily through those spaces. Well, that's all I've got for today, folks. Don't forget to like and subscribe and comment down below if there's anything you want to let me know. Stay tuned for more of my silliness, and we'll see you next time.